Okay, so if you've been anywhere near the news lately, you've probably seen these really conflicting headlines about Asaram Bapu. It's causing some serious whiplash. Yeah, one minute he's reported as a convicted prisoner, serving multiple life sentences. The next, headlines are shouting he's out of jail.
It's incredibly confusing for people. You immediately think, wait, did the courts drop the charges? Was there an acquittal? Did something massive just shift legally?
Exactly. So that's what we're doing today. We're going to try and unpack this properly. This is our deep dive into the actual legal sources to get clear on his true status right now. We need to look past the clickbait, really, and understand the precise legal mechanisms at play here. How can someone serving life sentences be temporarily outside prison?
And that distinction is absolutely critical if you want to be properly informed. It's not just in or out. We have to separate acquittal, which means, the conviction itself has gone from something very different, a temporary conditional release. Things like parole or interim bail. Understanding that legal difference is key. It's what takes you from just reading a headline to actually grasping the situation.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's start with the foundation,
Mm.
the convictions themselves, because this isn't about like a single incident. It's serious and it's across different places. We're talking about Asaram Bapu, real name Asamal Siramalani Harpalani. The legal spotlight really intensified back around 2013 with that incident in Rajasthan, an accusation of sexually assaulting a 16-year-old girl. It happened at his ashram near Jodhpur.
Right. And the conviction that followed in 2018 is really interesting, legally speaking. A special court in Jodhpur found him guilty, sentenced him to life. But what's crucial, and maybe a bit fascinating from a legal perspective, is the use of the POCSO Act, the Protection of Children from Sexual Offenses Act. That, alongside standard IPC sections.
And POCSO is significant, isn't it? It has specific procedures, stronger protections for minors.
Exactly. It mandates special courts, aims for speedy justice, and often carries heavier sentences. The court clearly felt the crime met that very high threshold for severity involving a minor.
And that wasn't the only major conviction.
Yeah.
There was another case, this one in Gujarat.
Yeah.
Yeah, in 2023, a different court, a sessions court in Gandhinagar, convicted him again, this time for raping a female disciple. And that resulted in another life sentence.
So let's just synthesize that for a moment. The legal bedrock here is firm. He is serving multiple life sentences. These are for separate, extremely serious crimes, 2 rapes judged in courts in 2 different states. So his status as a life-term convict, that's established through full judicial processes. Multiple courts found him guilty beyond reasonable doubt. That status hasn't changed, regardless of where he physically is right now.
Okay, so with that very solid legal foundation established, multiple life sentences, it makes the headlines even more jarring. How does someone with that status end up out of jail? And the answer, as you pointed out right at the start, is crucial. He wasn't permanently released. He wasn't acquitted. That's not what happened.
No. What we're seeing are specific temporary legal permissions being granted.
Right. Let's look at those mechanisms. The sources mention both interim bail and parole being used at different times.
And it's really important to understand these aren't the same thing, though they both allow someone to be outside prison temporarily. They're often mixed up in reporting. So parole is usually more administrative, handled perhaps by the state government or maybe a lower court. It's often for shorter periods, specific reasons like a family emergency or maybe, brief medical treatment.
Okay, shorter, more administrative.
And
interim bail.
Interim bail is different. That's a judicial process. It comes from higher courts, the High Court, or even the Supreme Court. It's often granted for longer stretches, specifically when a convict needs significant, complex medical care that, just can't be adequately provided inside the prison system.
And the recent headlines, the ones causing the most confusion, seem to center around that interim bail, right?
That's right. And the reason consistently given by the courts for granting these temporary releases, it boils down to medical and humanitarian grounds.
What specific reasons were cited in the rulings?
Primarily his advanced age, he's well into his 80s now, combined with some pretty serious health problems. The sources mention heart issues and other age-related complications.
Which, you can see, puts the courts in a difficult position.
Absolutely. It raises this fundamental question, what's the threshold for medical release? The judiciary has this constant balancing act. They have to weigh the seriousness of his crimes, these multiple life sentences, against the basic constitutional obligation to ensure any prisoner, no matter who they are, gets necessary treatment for critical health problems.
We can even see this pattern in the dates mentioned in the sources. Like August 2024, he got a very short 7-day parole. That sounds like the administrative type you mentioned, just for specific treatment.
Probably, yes. A short, targeted release.
But then, fast forward to January 7th, 2025, that's when the Supreme Court stepped in and granted him interim bail. And that was for a longer period, until March 31st, 2025.
And that Supreme Court involvement signals it's the more significant judicially approved interim bail based on those ongoing medical needs.
And what about conditions? Are there strings attached to these releases?
Oh, absolutely. And those conditions are really the ultimate proof that this isn't freedom. It's temporary, highly conditional relief. If you look at the court orders, they often include very strict conditions. Things like no holding public discourses, no addressing his followers, sometimes restrictions on talking to the media.
So the courts are trying to limit his public influence while he's out.
Exactly. It shows the court is aware of the potential issues. They're acknowledging the medical necessity on one hand, but trying to build in safeguards on the other. They're actively trying to prevent him using his, considerable public influence during these temporary periods outside prison walls.
And that tension, the valid medical reasons versus his public profile and the nature of his crimes, that's really where the controversy flares up, isn't it? Because while the medical grounds might be legally sound under humanitarian law, the repeated nature of these extensions, the frequency and length, that's what causes public friction and concern.
It's a very challenging dynamic for the courts and the state authorities. You have these legally solid convictions standing firm, but you also have this equally valid legal principle of providing necessary medical care, especially for elderly or critically ill inmates. The clash happens when these two undeniable legal principles meet head-on in such a high-profile, heavily scrutinized case.
And the scrutiny isn't quiet. The sources make it clear that victims, their families, and various activists have consistently pushed back. They strongly oppose these repeated bail and parole extensions.
Yes, their core concern isn't just about him being physically outside the prison compound for a while. Their fear, as expressed in the sources, is about the potential for him to exert influence, maybe intimidate people connected to the cases, or even just rally his base while he's not under maximum security supervision. It's a fear of that power being misused.
And it's not just the Supreme Court dealing with this. Other courts are involved too.
That's right. The sources mention similar interim bail periods, often for around 6 months at a time, being granted by both the Gujarat High Court and the Rajasthan High Court as well, consistently citing those same medical grounds.
So there's a pattern of judicial agreement on the medical necessity, it seems.
Yes, the judicial system appears consistent in applying that legal standard for medical release across different states. But as you said, it's the sheer number of these applications, the repeated nature for this one specific, very high-profile individual that keeps fueling the debate and the criticism.
Okay, so we've covered the seriousness of the convictions, multiple life sentences. And we've broken down the legal tools allowing temporary release, interim bail, and parole based on medical grounds. Let's try and bring this all together now. For you listening, what's the key takeaway to cut through the noise?
I think the absolute synthesis is this. Knowing the legal terms matters. You need to apply the right distinctions. The courts, like the Supreme Court and High Courts, when granting this bail, they aren't reevaluating his guilt. That's settled. They're evaluating his physical condition. So his status as a convicted life-term prisoner, that's permanent. His physical location right now, that's the result of temporary medical relief granted under strict judicial watch.
Right. So when you see that headline, Asaram Bapu out of jail, you now know what it really means. It refers only to that temporary medical parole or, more recently, the judicially granted interim bail. It does not mean he's innocent. It doesn't mean the life sentences were canceled or overturned. He remains a life-term convict who is just temporarily receiving medical treatment outside of the main prison facility.
Precisely. Conviction status is fixed. Location is temporary due to health.
Which really brings us to a final thought, something for you to consider as you process all this. This whole situation throws a spotlight on a really profound challenge within any legal system, doesn't it? How does a court system uphold the gravity of multiple life sentences for truly horrific crimes reflecting society's need for justice, while also sticking to humanitarian laws? Laws that say even the most serious offenders deserve necessary medical care when they face critical illness, especially due to old age.
It really is the ultimate ethical and judicial tightrope walk, especially, I think, when the prisoner involved has the kind of enormous social influence and, frankly, resource network that Asaram Bapu possesses that raises legitimate public fears about whether the system can be manipulated, even unintentionally.
Exactly. That constant tension between ensuring justice is served and ensuring humanitarian laws are applied fairly. That's what the courts wrestle with every single time one of these temporary release applications comes up.
And navigating that tension under intense public scrutiny is